Hello everybody and welcome to Trader Mind, the Trading Psychology and Performance Program. 6 webinars over 6 weeks, 60 minutes packed full of content, exercises and practical activities, and each ending with approximately 30 minutes of Q&A. Just a reminder, each of these webinars will be recorded and will be made available to you to listen again to afterwards. And at the end of the program, the complete series will be packaged up and again it'll be made available to you, so you've got the complete set to listen to again in your own time. I say that because each of these sessions is jam-packed full, and it may well take you a bit of time to work through everything in total. So do the best you can, and welcome. Before we get into the real meat, I have to, for legal reasons, read you this disclaimer. So the content of this webinar is the personal opinion of the presenter. The content does not constitute financial, investment or tax advice. Any reference made to asset classes and trading examples are for illustrative purposes only. You're advised to discuss your specific requirements with an independent financial advisor prior to entering into any trading or investment decision. By joining this webinar, you're doing so at your own will, and in doing so waive liability to any claims against the host, presenter, and any associated organizations and people. So I know many of you have been on webinars or seminars with me before, but I also know there's a large number of people who may not have come across me and my work firsthand. So just very, very briefly, and I'll let you read between the lines as we go along, a bit about myself. My name's Steve Ward. My company is High Performance Global. We provide performance consulting for financial traders, poker players, and in the sports betting world. My original background was sports and performance psychology, worked with over 30 different sports, teams and athletes up to Olympic level. Really enjoyed that. 2005 was asked to come and work in London with a group of financial traders. The hypothesis was, could sports psychology help traders? And I'm pleased to say that over the year that I worked very intensively there, we tested that hypothesis, and we found that it could very greatly help financial trading performance. And so since 2005, I've worked pretty much extensively in the financial markets with traders, at proprietary trading groups, retail traders, guys trading from home, and with investment banks. I also, for 2 years, managed a team of 40 proprietary traders here in London, which was great. I really enjoyed that and gave me a good insight. We did the training, recruitment, selection, the day-to-day management, which I really enjoyed. I was also lucky enough to be involved in the BBC Two program, $1 Million Traders, which some of you may have seen, which was a great program, and also managed in 2009 to write my first book, High Performance Trading, and literally in a few days' time, my second book, a sports trading book, Sports Betting to Win, that comes out as well. So also, I think important for you to realise I've traded myself. I started trading the mini Dow in 2006, and then got hooked in by FX in 2007, and have traded both those on and off over the years. Not as actively now as I might like to, but I think it's important to stress that I'm a trading coach and coach turned trader rather than a trader turned coach. And that's it. That's me. So I want to kind of start really by setting the scene a little bit, and it's interesting to reflect for me over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been involved in trading. And it's very similar to my early experiences in sports psychology. And there's a great quote there on the screen in front of you from Chris Hoy. You used to be the crazy one if you went to see the sports psychologist. Now everyone thinks you're crazy if you don't. And that reflects a shift in mindset from psychology being about fixing people, somewhere where you would go if something was wrong with you, and the shift has now been made to sports psychology is all about performance enhancement. And that same shift is gradually occurring in trading. My work's ever expanding because people are realizing it's not just about being fixed and lying down on the black couch and discussing all your problems. It is as much about performance enhancement, trying to get an extra edge. And one thing I say to all the people I work with actually in trading is, in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, the demands of achieving success in trading are greater than the demands of achieving success in sport. And I say that because there are just so many variables in trading. You know, so much uncertainty. There's the risk factor. There's making monetary decisions on top of all the performance psychology as well. So my hat's off to all of you, because I know some of you guys out there have been trading for a long time, and if you have, you know, that's no mean feat. So always in the back of your mind should be that experience you've got and the successes you've had over the years. So this program really is kind of based around performance enhancement. You know, we're taking that slant on it. It's going to be teaching you techniques and strategies to help you to improve your performance. And over the 6 weeks, we start off tonight with high performance trading. Next week, we look at the winning trader mindset, and we look at particularly around how traders make decisions. That's a key part in trading, what affects those decisions, and how we can make more effective decisions. In week 3, we look at the winning trader mindset part 2, and the main content here is around beliefs and attitudes and perceptions and the impact that they have on our trading performance, before going into week 4, where we look at dealing with losses and setbacks. Week 5, emotional state mastery. You know, I think all of us would agree that, you know, the topic of emotions comes up in pretty much every trading seminar and every trading book. They are key, and I'll talk to you about some of the techniques that I use to improve trading performance from that perspective. And then finally in week 6, we look at kind of bringing everything together, and we're looking at raising your game. And again, I'll throw in some techniques and strategies for performance enhancement, so that going beyond the program, you know, you've got some tools in the toolbox you can use that you never had before, some new insights, some new thoughts. It might also remind you about a few things that you used to do but aren't doing as much now. All of those things equally as valuable, but my goal over the next 6 weeks is to give you a very intensive and accelerated training in trader psychology and performance to work with you on improving your trading. And that's very important. You know, we've got the e-coaching option, which I think is quite unique to this program. So I really want to help you. That's my intention over the next 6 weeks. And it is important, though, to recognize that whilst you'll make many changes over the next 6 weeks, the real hard work, folks, is actually going to come beyond the program. The really hard work is going to come when the webinar series program finishes, and, you know, you've got to then sustain the good work you've done. So that's always the big challenge, and change can take anywhere between 30 to 90 days to ingrain. So we've got about 42 days together, and beyond that, you know, that second part is going to be down to you. So let's get ready. Here's a few things to think about which are really important. First of all, just take a moment now. I'd like you to reflect and think, now you've got an idea of the program, at the end of the 6 weeks, how will you know if the program's been useful to you? What will you notice? What will you be doing differently in your trading? So cast your mind 6 weeks into the future. The program's finished. What might you already have started doing differently? Go 6 weeks beyond that point, 12 weeks from now into the future, when you've begun to really ingrain some of those good performance habits. What differences might you notice to your trading? Now, I think it's really important to be aware of it, and this is a key thing in all my work, is that if we're looking to improve performance, essentially, what is performance? Performance is a collection of behaviors. So trading performance is a collection of trading behaviors. So if we're going to improve performance, essentially what we're talking about is improving behavior. So it's a behavioral change process. Now, it's really important to be aware of that, because to get the most from this program, you have to be willing to make those changes. You have to embrace the process of change. You have to be open and willing. And it's almost the mindset I encourage you to have is the mindset of curiosity. To come into each session with an open mind, with the radar set to how could this help me? So you're looking for those opportunities to improve performance. And it's critical, it's really critical to kind of immerse yourself into this program, to really commit to it, and importantly, to take action along the way. And certainly from when we've run this program in the past, the people who have engaged in the program fully have got a massive amount from the program, and it's really made a difference. But you will get out of the program what you put in, so it's very much a two-way process. I'm going full on. I'm going to try and give you all my energy, everything I know over the next 6 weeks, and I hope you can do the same for me as well from your perspective. So today, the first session, high performance trading. We'll look at the high performance trader. What is the high performance trader? That's the first question really to think about. We'll have a look at some essentials around trading strategy. Now, we're going to be focusing mainly on mindset in this program, but trading strategy is important. It's a component of trading performance, and we're going to spend just a few minutes touching on 3 key themes that you need to think about with your trading. We'll then have a look at the high performance trading cycle and the key aspects of that before looking at some follow-up actions and finishing off with a bit of Q&A. Today is absolutely jam-packed, so I make no apologies. I always like to give more than less, but it is going to be a bit of a rush as we go through, so make sure you're listening quickly, folks. Now, one of the most important things in performance is state, how we're feeling. State underpins performance. Performance is state dependent. That's the main message from we're going to look at in session 5. We need to get ourselves now into a state where we're relaxed and we're ready to learn. So I'd like to just take you through a very, very quick mindfulness relaxation. And this is something I'm going to encourage you to practice beyond today. I'm sure some of you might use relaxation or sort of meditation type practices in your trading already, and that's great. And if you'd like to, you can use this 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to do your own version. But for those of you who'd like to be kind of guided through it, we're just going to go into that now. It's a very, very simple process. You will find it in the workbook. And I say, I'd really encourage you to spend 5 minutes each day just practicing this. It's a great, great, great technique. So just sit yourselves comfortably in your chair. And I'd encourage you to have your back naturally straight and upright, have your feet out in front of you, and just legs just nicely comfortable and feet flat on the floor. And I'd like to invite you just to close your eyes, just to reduce any external stimulation, and allow yourself just to turn your mind inwards. I'd like to encourage you now to become aware of your breathing. And in this technique, I'd like you to inhale very slowly through the nose. And as you do that, just noticing and imagining the air entering and filling into your lungs. And after that in-breath, just holding for 5 seconds and imagining the clean air traveling around to all parts of your body. And then slowly releasing the air through your nostrils and just noticing the relaxation. Imagine breathing out all the toxins, all the tensions, and just pausing. And just breathing in again, nice and slowly. And just holding for a count of about 5. Imagine the air circulating around. And then slowly just breathing out now. Feeling relaxed. And again, just breathing in. Nice and slowly in through the nostrils, breathing in that clean, fresh air. Hold your breath, let it circulate around just for that 5 seconds. Imagine it filling all the way through your body. And you're slowly breathing out. And just allow yourself to begin to notice how each time you breathe out, you can relax even more. And again, just breathing in. Let the air circulate around and slowly breathing out. And just do a couple more in your own time now. Just find your own pace and your own rhythm. and really focus on the idea of kind of breathing in that air, let it circulate around, stretching round and in through all parts of the body, right out to the extremities. And that as you breathe out, you're breathing out all that tension, any stress, allowing yourself to relax even more, letting the mind clear, feeling centered, feeling ready. And that's a great technique, folks, you can use. It's very, very quick, and I'm sure already you can begin to notice how much more relaxed you're feeling, just a bit more balanced and centered. And we did that for just 2 or 3 minutes there. If you do it for about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, you just get that nice, quiet, calm state. And, like in the picture there, sometimes, particularly those of you who are working as well as trading, the mind can be full. And even if it's trading full time, you've got other things on your mind. There's family sometimes to deal with. There's life outside of trading. Sometimes we need to just kind of get the mind clear and ready. So it's a great technique. So now we're ready. Let's move on. High performance trading. Where do we start? Well, we start with essentially the 2 keys to trading success. And I'm sure you've seen this before, so it's a useful reminder. For some of you it may be new, but essentially we've got 2 things that are very important to being a great trader. We need to have a trading strategy with a positive expectancy, with some kind of edge that over time generates profits. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. We also, though, need the ability to consistently execute the trading strategy. Now, I like to think of this as being the outer game, sort of the skills, the knowledge, the strategy, and then the inner game, the trading psychology. And it's a combination of those 2 that's really important. And when people come to me for coaching, one of the things I'm looking at is where is the need? Is it really a psychological challenge they're having? Or is it perhaps maybe the trading strategy isn't as watertight, or even have a positive expectancy? So it is those 2 dimensions which are really important in being successful. And we can take it a step further by looking at this in terms of 4 quadrants. So we've got 4 quadrants there. We've got essentially down the vertical axis there, having a strategy with a positive expectancy and kind of good trading skills and knowledge, or not having those. And across the horizontal there, having good trading psychology and discipline, or not. So it can put you into one of 4 quadrants. Now, what I'd like to do is take the opportunity to just do a quick poll. And get you there, just in the poll there, just to type in which quadrant you're in. And I'll just give you a moment to do that, and then I'll be able to give you the feedback. Okay, just a few more seconds, and then we'll close the poll, and I'll be able to feed back to you the data. So here's what we find. 23% of you in quadrant 1, 71% in quadrant 2, and 6% in quadrant 3. Nobody in quadrant 4. So what does that mean for you? Well, let's have a look. If you're in quadrant 1, you are the high-performing trader. You've got the skills, the strategy, and you've got the psychology and the discipline. But of course, there's varying degrees of that as well. So we're doing it in a very simplistic form here with the 4 quadrants. But that's the quadrant you are in. The challenges here are consistency and sustaining performance. And my guess is that those of you who are in that quadrant, they're probably in some of the reasons why you're attending. Also in that quadrant, it's the whole goal of becoming even bigger and even better. So generally, sometimes it's about increasing size, taking more risk over time, so increasing profitability. If you're in quadrant 2, and don't be alarmed by the phrase the underperformer, because actually it's a good thing, because what it suggests is that you've got the skills and the abilities, but it's a bit like in sport where we see a player and we know he's skillful, but he doesn't seem to play his best game, never seems to quite, really come through and play well. And that's often because of the psychology side of things. So the great thing about being there is that providing like you guys are, you're open-minded and you're willing to come and learn and train your trading psychology and discipline, you can make the improvements and you can shift into quadrant 1. If you're in quadrant 3, again, very similar. I mean, these are often called the high potentials because you've got the right attitudes, you've got the right makeup. It's just about giving you those skills and knowledge. And if you're in quadrant 3, the primary goal for you is really about getting a trading strategy with an edge that you're comfortable with. So it's useful to have that model in your mind. Over time, you can kind of shift about from quadrant to quadrant, but obviously our ultimate goal, high performance trading, is to get there into quadrant 1. Now I want to talk just for a very short period of time on trading strategy, and I've put some activities and exercises on this in the manual. It's not going to apply to everybody, but I think it's really important because it is half of that initial trading equation. There are 3 things I'd encourage you to think about in your trading strategy. The first one is to ask yourself, what is your edge? What is your competitive advantage? What is it you've got that can enable you to make money, to be profitable? And that's a fundamental question to ask yourself as a trader. And it's something I often ask in my early interview sessions when I work with traders, is actually, what is the advantage you've got? What is the edge? So again, give that some thought over the next week or so. And the next one is, does your strategy have a positive expectancy? Now, expectancy basically is a formula. It's in the workbook there. It's on, let me just find the page for you. It's on page 6. You can see the calculations there, and it just gives you a number that tells you that over that period of time, what's the expected return on your trading for any given trade. So if the number's positive, that's great. The higher the positive, the better. If it's negative, then obviously it suggests that the more you trade, the more you're going to lose if those conditions persist. And also if it's a big negative number, then obviously it's, there's a little bit of concern there. So I would encourage you, and it's a useful exercise to do if you've got the data, to go back and test and find out, what is the expectancy of your strategy. And if you're using multiple strategies, then test it on the different strategies, and you might find that some have got a much higher expectancy than others. So it's a good calculation to do. And then the third thing to consider is this concept, and I think Brett Steenbarger, uses this in his book, Enhancing Trader Performance, and it's a great one, is this concept of niche. About finding, and I think Brett says, finding the right style of trading for you. And that's very true. And I like to think about it, like in sport where, you can be, let's say, a soccer player, and there's 11 positions on the pitch, but so you've got to kind of find soccer first. Maybe that's part of your niche, but also within soccer there are other niches. There's, are you the goalkeeper? Are you the striker? Are you the midfield player? Do you play on the right? Do you play on the left? Do you play in the middle? So there's all those variations, and essentially, you'll kind of find the sport that's right for you. Then within the sport, the position or the event that's right for you, and that's kind of the niche. Same as in work. There's kind of there's the generic career. It might be in finance, then it might be within banking, then it might be within investment banking, then it might be within trading, then it might be within FX trading. So there's that kind of working your way down to what is my niche. And again, in the workbook and the manual, I've put some questions there to encourage you to think about where your niche might be, because certainly I remember working with a group of traders, a proprietary trading group, probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, and all the traders were given the same product to trade, and that was obviously great from the group point of view, and it was easy for the training. But what it did mean is, as they progressed onwards into their trading careers, for some guys they were trading time frames and markets and strategies that weren't best suited for them. So part of the role there was to try and help those guys to individualize. So they had a very standardized approach to begin with, but then to individualize and find the types of trading, the strategies and the markets which best suited them, best suited their personality. So, that combination of the trader and the strategy and the market, there are 3 variables. And when we get those 3 things right, we get the sweet spot in the middle, and that's where your best potential for being profitable is going to come from. So, again, I'm not going to dwell on that too much because we're going to really focus heavily on the trading mind, but that is critical, I think, to consider. And even those of you who are experienced traders, I'd encourage you to take some time to reflect and think about your trading strategies from those three dimensions. So the performance cycle, the high performance trading cycle, as I also call it. And I know some of you will be familiar from this from webinars we've done previously, but it's a good reminder. And we're going to look at things slightly differently in tonight as well. So there'll be some new things for everybody. So three components: planning, execution, evaluation, but all held together from the central part, the mindset. Your mindset influences out into all those three areas. So mindset is critical, and that's obviously the focus for us over the next 6 weeks. Planning is all about creating the conditions and the opportunities for success. We're trying to set ourselves up. We're trying to put the odds in our favor. We can't ever guarantee success, but we want the odds to be in our favor. We then implement our plan. Our goal in execution is to flawlessly execute our trading strategy, to follow our rules, to be disciplined. As we do that, we'll get feedback. The great thing about trading is there's plenty of feedback. It's very visible and it's very instant. And that makes the potential for improving performance great, because when we get that feedback, if we use that feedback, then we can move ourselves forward. So we get the feedback, we need to look at what the feedback is, can we learn from the feedback, and then we can leverage it, utilize that, gain momentum, come back into the planning stage, and we're back around. And if we keep in that cycle, then we get continual improvement. Now, I'd ask you to consider and reflect on in your own trading how much time and intensity you put into each of those three key outer sections there: the planning, the execution, and the evaluation. And again, in the workbook, there's a good little activity in there which I'd encourage you to do, which gets you to think about, if 10 is the best I could be doing, how would I rate myself on planning, on execution, on evaluation? If you consider mindset as well, then you'll get yourself a score out of 40. And it's a good activity to do, because let's say, for example, planning is you gave yourself a 7, then the big question is, what would make it an 8? And what's the one thing, is there something you could do to make it 1 point higher? If your execution is a 6 or a 7, what could you do to make it a 7 or an 8? If evaluation's a 5 or 4, how could you make it a 5 or a 6? Always think about that, trying to make 1 point higher on the scale, because it's going to give you some very quick, simple actions to do. So again, I'd really encourage you to reflect and think about that, to look at each of those three components, to think about what you do in each section, and to see if you can improve it. And for me, it's all about marginal gains. Often in trading performance, when we look at it, there are often areas where we can make quick and simple gains. Sometimes we're looking for that big, massive improvement, and it's so hard sometimes to find it or to do it that it almost puts us off. We stay as we are. But if we can look at this incremental approach, and I'll give you an example of this from sport. British cycling up until 1992 are basically no-hopers. Between 1992 and the modern day today, 2011, they've become, on the track, the dominant force in cycling. And underpinning that success has been this philosophy of marginal gains. Can we find a bike that's 1% faster? Can we eat food that makes us 1% faster? Can we find a helmet that's 1% faster? Can we find clothing that's 1% faster? Can we find a tire that's 1% faster? Let's look around and find all those marginal gains and let all those 1% add up. So imagine now, if you could improve your planning by a few percent, and your execution by a few percent, and your evaluation by a few percent, and you improved your mindset by a few percent, suddenly, then you do get that big shift in performance. But it's breaking it down and taking those small steps which is really key. And interestingly, it's the small steps done consistently over time which often have the biggest and longest lasting success. So I want to encourage you beyond this program to reflect, to do the activity in the manual, in the workbook, and think about, trying to find that extra little bit, the marginal gains. There's a great film called Any Given Sunday. I don't know if many of you have seen it. It's an American football film, Al Pacino, and he does a speech before one of the big games in the film, and it's all about the inches. He talks about football's a game of inches. One step too fast, one step too slow. Throw the ball too far, don't throw it far enough. And it's really great. So it's a brilliant speech, very motivational. Pacino is brilliant in it. There is some heavy language in there, so do bear that in mind. But if you Google Al Pacino any given Sunday inches, it'll bring up the YouTube clip. I guarantee if you watch it, you'll like it. And it's so relevant to trading. I show it all the time with trading groups because it is all about where can we find those extra little bits. And as he says, they're all around you. They're all around you. So marginal gains, the inches philosophy, very, very important. So we're going to take a look at the three components of the cycle. We're going to start by looking at preparation. I want you to think about this. Imagine you're going on holiday. You get on the plane, you're sitting in your seat. Suddenly it gets towards takeoff time. You notice the pilot come running up the steps into the cockpit. You start thinking, oh, hang on, that's a bit weird. You know, the pilot's turning up late. He looked a bit harassed. Suddenly, you overhear the conversation from the flight deck. Sorry, I've turned up late, folks. Had a bit of a rough night. Didn't get a lot of sleep. What we're going to do today is to make sure we get our takeoff time. We'll skip the pre-flight checks and we'll just start the engines up and we'll give it a go. Now, I want you to think about how you would be feeling if you were on that plane at that time and how happy you'd be to stay on that plane. And probably most of us would be a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, and we may not want to stay on that plane. And why not? Because the pilot isn't ready. The pilot's not ready to fly the plane. Now, maybe we skip the pre-flight checks, maybe nothing happens. But what if? But what if something did, and it was down to the fact that the pre-flight check wasn't done? So, although the frequency of any kind of error may not be that high, the magnitude of the errors is. And trading's quite similar. Sometimes it's not so much the frequency of our errors or mistakes, it's the magnitude of when they do go wrong and when we do miss out because we weren't prepared. That's a big factor. So it's useful sometimes to think about preparation, and it is important because it's about risk management. It gives us confidence. It gives us that feeling of being a bit in control. It helps us to feel more composed. You know, because we're kind of ready for things. We've got a view of how the day might play out. You know, imagine if you had to give your money to somebody to trade, and that person just, you know, ran in, looked in a right old state, and said, "Oh, you know, I haven't got any time for any preparation. You know, give us your money. Let's see if we can make a bit of cash today." Would you really give that person your money? And I want you to now think back to yourself. And think, have there been times when you've been that person, when you've kind of maybe traded when you weren't ready, hadn't done your planning or your prep, or you weren't feeling quite ready, or you've been lacking in sleep, and you probably even knew you weren't ready, but you've traded anyway. So a part of my philosophy is what I call behavioral risk management. What does that mean? What it means is managing risk through managing behavior. In a trading institution, risk is managed in terms of financial risk. But at that point, the risk is already on. So my kind of approach is making sure that any risk that's on is on because it was the right thing to do in the first place, but also when it is on, that it's being well managed. And that's all about managing trading behavior. So if you think about that for yourself, think about your behaviors, the behaviors that help you to trade well, the behaviors that stop you. Try and do more of the things that help you, less of the things that don't. But manage your behaviors to manage your risk. Really, really key concept. Preparation is key. In sport, preparation is key. If you're giving a presentation, preparation is key. If you go for an interview, preparation is key. Performing artists, preparation is key. Trading, preparation is key. There's a great quote from The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which I really love. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Now, in terms of preparation, 4 components for me, and we're going to focus on 2 particularly today. First one is preparation and planning. What do I mean there? It's doing your research, reminding yourself of your trading strategy, looking at economic releases, looking at your charts, looking at the overnight, all the things which I'm sure most of you do most of the time, what I call the typical trader preparation. However, I would encourage you to reflect on how well you do that and how consistently you do it well, and make it one of your goals to always do that as well as you possibly can. What comes next for me are two key things, and the main focus of what I want to talk about in the next few minutes: rehearsal and eventualities. I want to come to eventualities first. Eventualities for me is what I call what-if thinking. I worked with some traders a little while ago, and one of the key themes we looked at was this concept of what-if thinking, i.e. at the start of the trading day to look at what's coming out, to look at the scenarios that may play out, and to plan some strategies in advance, such as if those things did happen, so i.e. what if that did happen, and then how would I respond? And what was really interesting is, over the course of that program with those traders, one of the things they came back to me and kept saying was, I feel more confident in my trading, I'm feeling much calmer and more composed. And a part of that, in fact a large part of it, was just purely down to thinking about what might happen. And some of those things did happen, and when they did, they were already ready for it. They kind of already had that plan in their mind. So it's a really important strategy. If you're not currently doing some what-if thinking up front, it's a really great thing to have a look at. And don't go mad with it. You haven't got to do every single possible eventualities, but have a look at some of the key things that might play out. Typically things, if you're trading around some numbers that are coming out, if it comes out above or below expected or at expected, what are you going to do? What are the three different approaches that you might do? But very, very key. Now, also, I like to encourage traders as part of their preparation to do a bit of rehearsal, to think about their trading strategies, to think about some of the what-if scenarios, and then to imagine themselves, to visualize, to mentally rehearse doing those things. Mental rehearsal is used extensively in sport. Very well proven, scientifically proven, particularly through fMRI scanning now on the brain. What we know is that in mental rehearsal, not only do we get the feelings which we associate with the visualization, so maybe we feel confident or positive, but at a brain level, at a neurological level, the brain can't tell the difference between the real experience and the imagined one, and we can create the neural pathways in the brain from visualization. So if you think back to when you've had maybe a nightmare, you wake up, maybe you feel a bit scared, you're sweaty, your heart's beating. All of that is a real feel, but it's from an imagined experience, as if it was real. So mental rehearsal, very powerful. And as we go through the program, I will be teaching you lots of different sort of mental rehearsal type strategies, because one of the key things about mental rehearsal, imagery, if we might call it that for a moment, is that the language of the subconscious mind is imagery. And next week, when we look at mindset, we'll look at the subconscious mind and the conscious mind and the differences. But just for now, one of the key things to recognize is that the subconscious mind, its language, is pictures. So the subconscious drives a lot of our behaviors, a lot of our automatic behaviors, and in programming those behaviors, it can be very useful to kind of use the same language that avoids any misinterpretation, just like if you're talking to somebody from a different country. And if you can use the same language, if you're fluent in it particularly, it makes it a lot easier. So a really great activity to do before you trade, and I've put it in the book, is a very short mental rehearsal. Spend a minute or two just relaxing, calming down, maybe using the technique that we used earlier. And then have available maybe 2 or 3 really peak trading moments, maybe some great trades you've made or some parts of days where you've traded really well, and rerun them in your mind. It's a bit like playing a video in your mind of those past successes. And what that does is 2 things. Gives you a feeling of confidence as you think about those past successes. Maybe you can think of 2 or 3 now. Think of a time when you've traded well in the past. Notice how you can feel more confident as you think about that. But also, as you're doing that, in your brain, it's activating that neural pathway of those successful actions and behaviors and thoughts and feelings, and it's enabling you to create them again into the future. So it's strengthening that part. So it's a really good mental warm-up. And then as a second component to that, I would encourage you to imagine trading your strategy. Maybe you see some trades setting up, execute them flawlessly. And thirdly, to do some what-if scenarios. Imagine some of your what-if scenarios and what happens and how you might react to them. And that whole process might take you between 5 and 10 minutes. But it can become very, very, very powerful. I'm a big believer in mental rehearsal and visualization. But it is a skill. It does take time to practice. Some people find it easier than others. But if you persevere with it, you will become better at it because it is a skill. So planning and preparation, key. Look at the eventualities. What if thinking, very important. A little bit of mental rehearsal. Could be past successes. Could be visualizing yourself trading well on that day coming up. Could be looking at your what if scenarios and imagining a few of those, or a combination of 2 or 3 of them, whatever you're comfortable with. And then the final thing I always like to get traders to do is positive state. Are you actually ready to trade? Do you feel ready? And that readiness is about physical readiness, kind of being rested, being energized, feeling ready from that perspective, but also mentally and emotionally engaged, ready to go. And a very simple technique, checking in. 10, ideal trading state. 1, you should be taken away from the trading screen as fast as possible. And just check in where you're at. And if it's a higher number, you're probably great to go. If it's a middle number, 4, 5, 6 maybe you could have a little look at your state and think, okay, what can I do to change this to make it higher? And if it's a low number, that's really like a little amber light coming on. It's a warning light. Hang on, if you're a 1, 2, 3, what is it? What are you feeling? Is it real tiredness? Are you kind of really still frustrated from the day's trading before? Have you just got in from work and your mind's really buzzing and you can't really focus? Because we have to understand that state, remember, affects performance. Performance is state dependent. And in session 5, this is why we're going to do a whole session on state, because it's such an important factor. So a few things there to think about in terms of your preparation. And I say there's activities in the workbook to go through, which I'd encourage you to do as we go along. Flawless execution. Essentially, what we're talking about here is discipline. Having a plan, trading the plan. The old cliches. That's really what we're talking about. And people often say to me, well, how do I do that? What's the kind of the process behind it? So here's a few things that I've kind of developed which I think are useful to think about. The first one is to think about trading as this 5-stage process here. So we've got monitoring, so we're looking at the markets, we're observing, seeing what's going on. We're looking to spot an opportunity. We look to enter the trade, or not, as the case may be. If we do get in on the trade, then we manage the position, and then we've got the exit from the position, and then we're kind of, assuming we're kind of one trade on at a time, we're back into monitoring. Obviously, it's possible you might have several of these cycles overlapping each other. But now, in terms of how we start to think about flawless execution, what I think is interesting to think about is at each stage to become aware of what are the key things for you to be doing. So what I call the process. What are the key things to be doing at each stage? But also, what are the ideal thoughts to be having? So what's your thinking? What kind of things should you be thinking at each stage? And what are the key feelings to have at each stage? And it's almost like having a bit of a blueprint. So, what are the key actions? What are the key thoughts? What are the key feelings? And if you know what they are for each of those 5 stages, then it gives you something to reference against, to aim for in your own performance. And you can almost check off against it. So when you've had a trade that maybe didn't go to plan, you can isolate which area of the process was it. Because often people talk to me about, they've had a bad trade. But if you think about it as 5 component parts, it may not be the whole 5 things that were bad as such. It may be a component part. And what you may notice in your trading when you evaluate based on these 5 component parts is you may find themes that is typically a similar component part and therefore give you an area to work on in particular. So, you'll see in the manual, there's a great activity to do, page 13, where I encourage you to go through those 5 stages to think about, what are the key actions to be doing at each one? What are the kind of thoughts that would be useful to have? And what are the kind of feelings that would be useful to have? What you can then do, you can use that as part of your mental rehearsal, because once you know what kind of thoughts and feelings you want to have and the actions, they're the things you can practice in your own mind. So it gives you a bit of a framework to work from. Each of the things, each of the components in those 5 stages should be a controllable by you. So the actions, the thoughts and the feelings should be controllables, because one of the key philosophies or strategies in sports psychology is focus on the process, control the controllables. That's all you can do, but then you've got to know what the process is, and you've got to recognize what is controllable and what isn't controllable. And a large part of my work when I'm doing training or coaching with traders is trying to help them to identify and to connect with the process and the controllables. We've got two main resources, time and energy. So let's allocate our time and our energy into where we get a good bang for our buck: process and controllables. Now, some of you will be familiar with this model. Some of you will be the first time you've seen it. It's a very simple model. The hub is a bit like the trading zone. It's the flow when things are going well. And the outside of that is the rim. And ideally, we want to be in the hub. We're trading well. We're doing the right things. We know that 5-step process, that sits nicely inside the hub. We're working through that. However, as we know in trading, quite often we get pulled out of that hub. Things distract us. Things get in the way. I call that interference. It could be life outside trading. It could be a losing trade. It could be a big winning trade. It could be the market slows down and you start to get bored. It could be a whole number of factors. All those ill disciplines that you've ever experienced or read about, they all sit out there on the rim. And one of our key goals in trading is to be able to stay inside the hub as much as we can. So again, in the workbook, there's a little activity in there I think it's really powerful to do, which is to recognize when you're in the hub, when trading's going well. Think about this now. When trading's going well, what is it like when you're in the hub? Think about a time when you were trading in the zone. You had that flow state. It's coming naturally. It's coming easily. It's a great feeling to have. But we don't want that to be random. So the question is, what can help you to get into the hub? What kind of things do you notice that help you be in the hub? And as you begin to identify those, you can use it as a bit of a blueprint to start to replicate those and get in the hub more often. On the flip side, we also need to be aware of what's it like when we're at the rim. What kind of things take us out of the hub? And people often say to me, oh, I'm a disciplined trader or I'm not a disciplined trader. But discipline's a massive word and it covers a multitude of aspects. So we need to be specific in what those things are. And there are 15 to 20 key areas where traders can be disciplined or not. But for most traders, it might be 1 or 2, which are the main challenges. So it's important not to make things too global, too pervasive. We need to keep things a bit more specific and smaller, because then we get the feeling that we can actually work on them and do something about them. So again, I'd encourage you, in the workbook to go through to think about what it's like when you're in the hub. Think about times when trading's gone really well. Notice what helps you to be in the hub. And they're what I call the critical performance factors, so things that really help you to perform well. And then start to be aware of the times when you typically get pulled out of the rim. Now, people often say to me, or talk to me about the concept of being, pulled out to the rim, being ill-disciplined, making mistakes and the impact. But that's actually not the most important factor. The most important factor is if you do get pulled away from the hub, recognizing that you have, and also how quickly you can recover. And that's the skill of the top sports person over the amateur, is how quickly they recover. Now, I just want to, again, launch another quick poll here. So just thinking in terms of the 5-stage model, just go back to here for you. Apologies for that. Just a quick poll. I want you to think about, where do you tend to be least disciplined? So where do you tend to be least disciplined? Just give you a few more moments. Okay, we're getting quite a nice distribution here. Just give you literally a few more seconds and I'm going to close the poll. And closing now. So here's the results. We've got 19% in monitoring, 19% in spotting, 49% on entering, 30% managing, 46% exiting. Now remember, obviously you can tick multiple boxes, so they won't add up to 100. So the two key areas are the entry and the exiting of the positions. And I guess we're probably not too surprised by that. But it's important to be aware of that for you, because let's say you put down just exiting. What it does mean is that 80% of the process you're okay with. We just got to get the 20% at the end right. So, you know, it's all about keeping this small and contextual so it's manageable and we can be really focused on working on specific areas. So just a reminder on the hub again as we whiz through. And now this is one of my favorite topics. 4 types of trade. A trade can be a disciplined trade, and again in simple terms this, folks, yeah, or undisciplined. So we followed our plan or we didn't. We can get a winner or a loser. Just type into the Q&A box there what you think is the best the best trading outcome. Okay, so the majority there of you have gone for a 1, which I'm pleasantly pleased to say I would agree with. So we were disciplined and we have a winning trade. Now, so let's get some kind of group agreement that a 1 is the best trade. Here's my next question to you. Which is the second best outcome? So which is the second best outcome? Okay, interesting. So I would say probably the majority, probably about 70% have gone for quadrant 2 there, the disciplined trade that loses, and the 30% have gone for a 3, the undisciplined trade which wins. Now my own view on this is that it would be a number 2 would be the next best outcome, and my reasoning for that is because where we make the undisciplined trade and we win, we were undisciplined, which isn't great trading behavior. Remember, we're trying to condition good trading behavior, but we get a reward. So the way I look at it is, that's like when you're a child, you're naughty, and then your parents give you extra pocket money. Now think about it. You're naughty, you get extra pocket money. Then you're naughty again another time, and you get extra pocket money. Think about the connection you're beginning to make. So what's actually happening is we're conditioning naughty behavior in trading terms. If we get too many quadrant 3s, we start to condition and start to seek more of the undisciplined behavior. Now the challenge in that is that the more undisciplined we are in our trading, the more likely we are to get the quadrant 4 trade. And the quadrant 4 trade is often the really big losing trade. The quadrant 2 trade is often a managed loss. You know, it's a risk managed loss. It's part of our trading outcomes. A quadrant 4 are often the ones that get out of control. So we don't need too many 4s to make a massive impact and dent in our trading accounts. So my challenge to you, my suggestion to you is to think about your trades as you're making them, and to review your trades after you've closed them out, and think about which quadrant you would put them into. Now, simple little exercise for you to do now. Just have a think. If you had to allocate your trading outcomes in percentage terms into each of those 4 quadrants, how would they fall? For example, it could be that winning quadrant 1, 50%, quadrant 2, 20%, quadrant 3, 20%, quadrant 4, 10%. So have a think for you. If you reflect back on your trades, how many of your trades are disciplined winners? How many are disciplined losers? What percentage might be undisciplined wins, and likewise undisciplined losses? And it's a great activity to do. I did this with a trader recently, an FX trader, and his challenge was he felt he was being ill-disciplined. He's been a bit reckless with his trading. So I just showed him this model, and I said to him, look, before you place a trade, be thinking about what are the likely outcomes. Because if you're making a reckless, undisciplined trade, it can only be a 3 or a 4. But if you're making a disciplined trade, it can only be a 1 or a 2. So you either kind of go in top level or bottom level trade. And the goal was for him to try and make a higher number, percentage terms, of top level trades, i.e. every trading outcome to be a 1 or a 2. Even if you get lots of 2s, that's interesting feedback, but you're not going to wipe yourself out if you're managing your risk correctly. It's a 4s. They're the danger trades. So I'd encourage you to be thinking in your own trading as you're placing your trades, if this is relevant for you, thinking about, is this going to be a top draw trade or is it a bottom level trade? And it's a useful thing to do on a periodic basis to think about where your trades might go. And that trader I worked with, he had a 60-40 split whereby 60% of his trades were coming from the top level, but 40% were coming from the bottom level. So essentially 4 out of every 10 trades were ill-disciplined. That's a large number. We managed over quite a short period of time to get it to 80-20 in a very, very quick period of time. And, my suggestion is, with more focus, he could easily get that to a 90-10 and maybe even to 100-0. But it was that very quick, over a couple of weeks, just that extra focus made all the difference. A focus on discipline, on trading well. That's what we want to be doing. Focus on trading well. Let's reward ourselves on trading well. The whole focus is on the process and trading well. Now, the final part of the cycle, the high performance trading cycle, is evaluation. And for me, evaluation is about looking in the mirror. The trader trades the market. The markets are brilliant. They give us loads of feedback. We see that in numerical terms. We see it in our own thoughts and feelings about our performance. We get this mixture of analytical feedback and emotional feedback, but we're getting feedback. But it's what we do with that feedback that's really key. Now, there are 3 levels of trading performance. Whenever you talk to traders about how they're doing, they talk to you about P&L. And of course they do. It's the bottom line measure. It is the measure, realistically. Just as in sport, the result's the ultimate measure of performance. However, there are other levels to get a better balance. So performance for me is all about the metrics. How many trades did I make? How many winners? How many losers? What was my biggest winner, biggest loser? What was my average winner? What was my average loser? A whole number of metrics, of stats that we can get. It's a bit like in sport whereby, in soccer we might get the result, then we get the performance metrics, how much possession did each team have, how many shots on target, how many corners, how many free kicks, how many red or yellow cards were given out, and so on. So that's a good measure. But at the bottom, again, and I come back to thinking, feeling, and doing, we've got the process, what we actually did. And the key thing about P&L is whilst it's the ultimate measure, thinking about your P&L does not generate P&L. Thinking about performance metrics gets you into a performance discussion, but alone won't generate any performance improvement. So what generates performance improvement is what you do, what you think, and what you feel. So going back to our 5-stage model. If you're effective in that 5-stage model and your strategy has an edge, then over time you're going to make money. My feel, having worked with many, many traders across the globe over the last 6 years, is a lot of traders have good trading strategies, but get in their own way. There's a great story about Bobby Jones, the golfer. I think it was from the 1920s. and I think he was the first player to win all the majors. I'm sure some of you will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there's a great bit in the film, the Bobby Jones story, whereby he's out on the golf course and his coach comes up to him and says, "Bobby Jones, you're going to be the greatest golfer the world has ever seen, just as soon as you get out of your own way." And it's so much like that in trading, you know. And I was chatting with somebody earlier today, and it is, you know, the biggest challenge in trading is often us. And, you know, that's why we're here, you know, looking at developing our psychology. So, but thinking, feeling, and doing is important. So in your trading, when you come to evaluate your trading, just noting down your P&L is not enough. Start to have a think about some of these metrics. How many trades, how many winners, losers, maybe how many longs, how many shorts, which markets did you trade in? Start to get a bit interested in your performance. And one thing I noticed in sports psychology amongst the highest performers was this fascination with performance. They loved their performance. They were really intrigued by it all. They wanted to get better at it. And I think that's key in trading as well, you know, to kind of know your numbers, but also to recognize the power of process. And I worked recently with a trader who had a phenomenal start to this year, having done some work last year. And it was all based around the idea that, you know, the market, the M plus the T, the trader, equals our P&L. So how the markets trade and how the trader trades the markets generates the P&L. And so we talked about this very simple model whereby we get these outcomes, and what influences that particularly are the markets and our decisions around the markets. And I got him just to focus on and be thinking about what the markets did and the decisions that he made. And it had a massive, massive, massive difference for him, a massive difference, because again, it brought him back down away from this P&L focus all the time, back into process. And I remember when I was talking to him, he said to me something that was really powerful. He said to me, "What's happened to me over the last few months is I now feel free. I feel free. I'm more confident. I believe in myself and my strategy more." But actually what he's done is he's just brought himself back down into this understanding that he's the decision maker. The decisions he makes in those market conditions, they create an outcome. An outcome is created. It's not just kind of suddenly appearing there. So again, I'd really encourage you to think about in your evaluation, think, you know, what the markets did, but also the decisions you made in those markets. Now, in terms of evaluation, key things you can do, trade log I think is absolutely essential. Every trade should be logged, every winner, every loser. Some people like journals, so kind of much more of a descriptive process. And I also think, you know, periodic reviews, so maybe on a monthly or a 6-weekly or a quarterly basis, depending on your trading frequency, to sit back and look at your performance over that time is very, very, very powerful. So just a little poll. Just like to get your thoughts on what you're using in terms of evaluation. So if you can just complete the poll there on the screen, just by indicating which of those you currently use. So you might use more than one of those, that's fine. But which of those are you currently using in terms of evaluating your performance? And just give you a few seconds before the poll closes. And closing the poll now. Hey, now this is interesting. So we've got 56% keep a trade log of every trade. Now what that means is that for 44% of you, there's a great opportunity here to really begin to focus in on your trading performance, and I guarantee you it will make a difference. People often say I haven't got time for trade logs or it's too complicated. Even doing something simple. The guy I spoke to about a minute ago, all he did was a one-liner, you know, a one-liner on each trade and 2 or 3 lines at the end of each trading day. That's your starting point. Get started with it. 41% of you keep a journal of your thoughts. Only 21% use performance metrics. That's really surprising, folks. 41% do a periodic review, and 32% of you review mainly in your head. They're interesting stats. Now, the exciting thing is that for a large number of you, there's a couple of really tangible actions here you can take away, guaranteed they'll make a difference. If you're not keeping a trade log yet, really strongly encourage you to do that. So powerful. So powerful. You'll remember trades which are big winners and big losers, essentially, but the bulk in the middle, probably not, because there's not enough emotion behind it to really engage it in your memory. So a lot of your performance is getting lost. So a trade log, really powerful. It also keeps you focused and disciplined, because the act of writing something down is far more powerful and far more engaging than just doing it in your own mind. We have about 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day. Very hard to separate out in your head which are important or not. When you start writing them down, that's a good differentiator. So trade log, if you're not doing that yet, that could be a definite action for you. And performance metrics, these are great things to keep, and they're actually quite simple. So you don't have to go mad. You haven't got to be a mad mathematical stats person, but just use for, how many trades have I made? Maybe do it on a weekly basis, or if you do a lot of trading, do it on a day or over a month. How many trades did I make? How many winners? How many losers? Nice, simple thing. What's my average winner? What's my average loser? What's my biggest winner and biggest loser? Just a few simple stats. Start with maybe 5 or 6. I did some work for a big proprietary trading group, and one of my big projects there when I first started was introducing performance metrics. And I'm really pleased now, because since I've finished working with them on that big project, it's one thing that they've all carried on doing. It's one of the things that at first kind of people resisted a little bit, because the thing with your stats is that the stats are the stats, the numbers are the numbers. They tell it to you as it is. It's like looking in a mirror. That is you. You are the person in that mirror. But for some people, that's a bit frightening. We don't want to really know. We don't really want to know the full in and outs of our trading performance. Particularly if it's not going too well. But one of the ways of improving things is to start measuring them. Great phrase. What gets measured gets done. So that was a really interesting poll. Really interesting. So there's some great actions for some of you there. Some great actions. Just to finish off, just want to talk about this little triangle from The Inner Game of Work by Timothy Galway. I like this because we talked a lot about performance tonight, and it's been very heavily on performance tonight. We've covered a lot of information in a very short period of time, and I want just to kind of remind you that performance is the top of the pyramid, and we tend to really focus on performance, but at the base of this pyramid are learning and enjoyment. And I want you just to remind yourself, and there's a great little activity in the book to do, just like a little chart you can fill in, where you can look at your balance of performance versus learning versus enjoyment. Because if you're really learning a lot and you're enjoying what you're doing a lot, you will be getting a good level of performance. But often we overly focus on performance and at the expense of our learning and the expense of enjoyment, and actually what it does is it collapses the pyramid. So we want to try and keep a nice balance of those 3 aspects. So good little activity to do in the manual, in the workbook towards the end there, and useful to reflect on over time. Check in. Am I focused on my performance? Am I still focused on learning? Am I still focused on enjoyment? And what's really impressed me with many of the great traders I've worked with is their focus on learning, but also how much they still enjoy trading, and that's probably a big reason behind why they perform so well. So a few things to think about as we come towards the end of the main session. I'd encourage you to listen to the webinar again. We've covered a lot of information in a very quick period of time. Tonight's the most intensive session. A lot of information tonight because it's really important. It's really important material. And they're like the building blocks. They're the foundations. If you get preparation in place and we get this focus on execution in place, if you get your evaluation in place, that can actually give you a good solid, almost like a mindset foundation already. So we get those basics in place, and then we can build on it from there. So a few things you can practice and go away and do. You can have a think about those. Listen again to the webinar. I'd really encourage you to go through and complete all the appropriate exercises in the workbook. So you've got to look at these sessions from your own kind of viewpoint. What's going to be useful for me? What are the main things to focus on? Listen to the webinar again. Do the main activities from the workbook which are relevant to you. Take out some key actions that are relevant to you. It might just be one thing each week. If you take out one thing each week, that's going to be 6 new things you're doing by the end of the program. And if you keep doing those, that's going to be phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So taking action is key. I want to hand over now to you guys, and we'll do some questions again. So the first question, and it's a great question, is where do we listen again? And what I'll do is tomorrow we'll send out a link for you to go to where you'll be able to access the recording. So it won't be available until tomorrow, but it will be available then for you to listen to. So we'll notify you by email. So that's a good question. Okay, so question here about the workbook. The workbook should have been emailed to you already, so you should have had that. What will happen is each week you'll get the GoToWebinar reminder to go and tune in, and you should a day or two before also get the workbook via email. So if you've not had that yet, then if you drop me an email at info@highperformanceglobal.com, and I will email one over to you. Question here, which markets or strategies are best suited to an individual's personal psychology? That's a really great question there that's come in, and it's not quite as simplistic, I think, as kind of as that. I mean, one process that that we use with the professional traders that I work with is we do some psychometric testing. And we look at factors such as risk-taking, decision-making speed, whether somebody is externally focused or internally focused, whether they're kind of very intuitive or very analytical. So we kind of build a little bit of a profile of that person, and then we'll have a look at the markets. And it's not as easy as kind of an ABC type approach, but it can certainly give us a few insights. But we also take, information from the traders about what they enjoy doing, where they've been successful in the past, where they've struggled in the past. So there's a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of science. But I think the volatility of the market can be a big factor. Whether markets trend a lot or range a lot can have a big factor for people. But there are other factors to consider as well in terms of lifestyle, in terms of when the markets are accessible. The time frame you trade over, you might want to be a short time frame trader, but you might not have enough time to spend that time in front of the market. So there are other factors as well. But what sort of things do you put in your trading log other than entry, exit? So I would suggest typical things are obviously, the trade you put on, so the time you got into the what the trade was, how big the trade was, what the trade was, whether you were long or short, the time you put the trade on, I think it's quite important. Likewise, obviously the exit. So obviously, how you got out of the trade, and again, what the time was, so you can start to look at how long you're in your trades for. That can be quite an interesting fact to have a look at. And above and beyond that, you might want to put it into a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So which quadrant would it have fitted into? That can be interesting. And then a short summary, which just kind of gives any specific feedback that might be useful. I think that's really key as well from a process perspective. With the 4 types of trade, do you break that into the parts of entry and exit, disciplined entry and undisciplined exit? I I haven't done that, but it's actually, you know, it's a very good idea and very valid. If you can kind of make that work for you, you could actually, couldn't you? You could do, give yourself a score for entry and a score for exit. So that's a great idea. I like it. Can you type into the workbook without printing out? I'm afraid you can't. It's in PDF format, so that's obviously just to protect it from being obviously mass-produced and ripped to pieces. So it's in PDF, so you would have to print it, I'm afraid, unless you you know, can get into PDFs and write on them. So. Can you talk about mindset? Can you give a few words on a trader who trades a short-term strategy but is looking to expand into longer time frames? My concerns are short-term, impatience development if a lack of discipline in terms of behavioral changes. I'm not sure if I quite got that question through properly there, but in terms of the transition from short-term to longer time frame, and it's something I've done with a few traders, one of the key things to remember is it is a transition, so you are moving from one way of trading to another, and whilst you'll have a whole host of transferable trading skills, there's still going to be that process of learning something a little bit different, so you have to kind of go back into learner mindset and have that learner frame around you as you go through, and let go of the expectations around making lots of money or equaling your money that you have been making, because it's I guess it's a bit like you know, if a Formula One driver goes into rally cars, whilst he's got all his driving skills available, there's still some uniqueness to driving a rally car that are different. So he wouldn't probably expect to perform as well initially, but he can bring his transferable driving skills in, has to learn how to drive the rally car well, and then he can be, you know, top of the game, you know, after a while. So see it as a transitionary process, I would say. And also, you know, with all these things, sometimes it's about trying it out with minimum risk, try it out with really small size, just see how it goes. In terms of behavioral change, is it best practice to focus solely on one or two behavior changes? Yes, I would say very key. And this is, I mean, the challenge for me on these programs is that I love giving people the information, and I generally probably always give too much into each session, as you found out tonight, so they get a bit crammed. But I'm conscious we've got kind of 6 hours. I could talk about preparation for 2 hours on its own, but we've got 6 hours and I want to cover a range of topics. So it's really key to pick out each week maybe one or two things and work on those. Over the 6 weeks, you may see some themes coming through for you. So it might be particular things that you can keep working on and kind of build on those. It might be that you just kind of do some of the quick, simple gains, some of the little marginal gains as we go through the program. And I know that there was one guy from the program we did 2 years ago where he kind of did little bits and pieces through the program, did some of the exercises, used it to kind of raise his awareness, and then after the program kind of digested it all, took a bit of time, picked one or two things to really focus on, and made that his kind of, you know, his kind of real key gains came beyond the program from doing that. So, but certainly sometimes if you try and do too much, you end up doing nothing well. So I would always suggest, you know, a shorter, more intense focus can get better results more quickly. Is it possible to be too analytical with a trading log? Can you have too much information? Yeah, I mean, I'm one of these guys, and I'm very much around, my frames are always never right nor wrong, but what's useful or not useful. And you've got to design your evaluation process so it's useful for you. So sometimes if I've got guys who I know are kind of much more flow and intuitive, I won't bog them down in too much analysis. Whilst that can be really useful, we'll find that middle ground whereby they're getting some interesting data. It might be much more kind of a journaly rather than numerical. So you've got to design what works for you, but what definitely is not useful is if you don't do any evaluation, because to improve performance, you have to have some kind of feedback to work from to improve that performance, no matter what it's in. So it's about, how do I get that feedback? How do I utilize it in the best way for me? So some people are very analytical, so they'll, they love, very statistical type feedback. People who are a bit more flow sometimes prefer, a bit more of a journaling type approach. So probably a combination of the two is ideal, in a way that's right for you. Do professional traders have to follow strict trading setups, or can they trade in their own way or style? From training programs, they often get taught some standardized processes, and then they're encouraged to individualize over time. And actually, that's the right way, because even guys, if you go on a learn how to trade course anywhere, you'll get taught some kind of strategies and approaches, and they may or may not suit you. So the danger is, if you kind of stick with an approach that you've been taught, you may not be making money, not because you can't be a good trader, but just purely because the way you're trading isn't best aligned with you and your kind of personality and your interests and your strengths and what you're interested in. I remember one guy, he was trading the Bund, the German 10-year government bond, and really had no interest in it. Didn't even know, when he came to trading, didn't know what a Bund was, didn't really want to know what a Bund was. And we switched him after a while when he wasn't performing well. We switched him to oil, and he just loved it. We had to, when he was doing the Bund, we had to kind of, really hassle him to do his preparation, to do his evaluation. It was really hard work, and it shouldn't be that with a trader. And we switched him into oil, and he loved it, and we never had to encourage him to do preparation and evaluation. He just kind of became engrossed in it. He became, an expert in oil and all the associated products and energy products, because he was interested in it. So such a big factor. So standardization first, but you need to move to individualization over time. As a beginner, does one concentrate on one market or go for several? I would generally say, and again, it's my view, but I would generally say it's easier to focus on one market with a small number of strategies, maybe only even one or two sometimes, and get good at those. And then over time, as you build your basic and your core trading skills, then develop. Now, the thing about trading markets is they're a bit like relationships. So when you're in a relationship with a person, when you first start going out with that person or dating them, what happens is you don't know them that well. So there are lots of cues that unconsciously aren't being picked up, and it's a very conscious process. And sometimes the person says to you, yes, that's all right. You think, oh, they mean yes, that's all right, but really they don't. But when you've been with them for a long time and they say, oh yeah, that's all right, they really mean, well, I'm saying yes, that's all right, but I'd rather you didn't, because of all the subtle clues around that. So when you get to know a market really well, you get to pick up all the fine distinctions, all the subtle clues, and that's actually really important. And that's why lots of experienced traders, well, sometimes they'll know what to do but can't always explain it. It's because of that kind of intuitive response from knowing the market really well. It's more of a feel rather than a cognitive process. But that only comes over time. But you don't get that as a beginner. If you try and focus on 4 or 5 markets, you don't get to know each of them as well. So you never get to that stage of having that kind of real fine tuning, that instinct. So for a beginner, I would say generally one market, 1 or 2 strategies would be enough. Get good at those first. Okay, question here. Collective consciousness that moves the markets is the same that affects me and everyone else. If I pick up a winning trade, I close way too soon. If next time I pick up a trade and hold it, it seems to always come back on me. The trades I close too early seem to be the ones I should have let run, and the ones I let run turn into losers or problem trades. It's everyone's problem. One of the challenges in trading is that you've got to be consistent in your performance, and that's a challenge when the markets are random, as we know. And if our approach is random, if we cut some trades short and we and then we run other ones, then if we're random in our approach within a random environment, then the chances are that that randomness can work against us, you know, and it can feel that way. And it is a feel, which is really important. It feels that way. It may not be. So the challenge is to be consistent in your execution, trying to even out some of the randomness in the markets, but also to make sure you're recording those trades, because often when I speak to traders and they tell me that kind of information, and I'll say, well, where's the hard data in your trade log? They haven't got it. It's a feel, and the problem with that feel is that emotionally, you know, we remember the winning trade we cut short. We remember the trade that we didn't take that went on to be a winner, but we don't remember the ones that would have been when it would have been the right decision. We just remember the times that we kind of missed out, because as we know in trading, missing out, the fear of missing out is such a big driver, it's such a big worry for traders. So emotionally it's strong. So whenever we feel we've missed out on anything, that emotion is strong, and emotion connects with our memory, so we remember these things really strongly. So we have to make sure when we're making when we're drawing conclusions about our trading, that we've got the hard data in our trade log to support it, and that we're not going purely off our kind of emotional feel, which can be skewed by many different biases. But coming back to what you were saying with your question there, or your statement, is the key thing is if you're consistent in your execution, then you'll start to, that should start to, you know, skew it more in your favor. Can I give some examples of performance metrics I use with the pro traders I work with? Yep, so some key ones that I use, I mean, easy ones are how many trades you've made, how many winners, how many losers, obviously very simple one. Average winner and average loser. Biggest winner, biggest loser. I also do one which is I get the average winner and divide it by the average loser. We call that the payoff ratio. It gives an idea of kind of risk reward. We also keep expectancy, so that's a key factor as well. It's a dynamic number, it moves over time, but it's useful for reference. And they're probably the key ones, you know, for most people. I think programs like TradeStation have stats built into them. I know that TT Pro has a metrics package on it. I think there's online programs you can get which do trader metrics, but a lot of them you can do quite simply with a few, you know, with a spreadsheet, and you'll get a good output, because it is like, look, you know, the key thing about it is it's numerical. And I remember working with some traders at one of the prop groups where we did some metrics work, and sometimes they were surprised by how different the numbers were to their feeling. So sometimes they might be feeling that things weren't going well, that it was all doom and gloom. I could show them the numbers, and actually there would be some quite positives in those numbers, and they tell a slightly different story sometimes to what our emotions tell. So they're a good thing to embrace. In the book High Performance Trading, in my book, there's a chapter all on performance metrics. So if you've got that, have a look in there, and it's got, you know, a whole range that you can use. I keep a log, but I don't always remember to read it. Should we read yesterday's log at the start of the next day? I think with your log, the big value is in doing the writing down. That's the main thing. And at the end of your log, I would encourage you to have some kind of, where appropriate, some kind of action. And then it might be that the action is what you look at the next day, or the reminder. But yeah, I mean, for some people, looking at your log from the day before can be really useful, because it can be a reminder of the things you've done well, and a reminder of the areas where you need to improve. So the key thing I say with all these processes is, I try and present, I guess, things in a framework basis, but what you've got to do is personalize it and make it work for you in between. So always give things a try. Try it for a couple of weeks. If it helps you and it's useful, keep doing it. If you feel it's not quite right, play around with it. You know, this is as much an art as it is a science, as much as I'm trying to make it a little bit Do I see any differences in the personality of short-term traders and longer-term traders? I would call it more styles and personalities, but yes, there are definitely, generically speaking, there are some key differences. One of those tends to be decision-making speed, how quickly people like to make decisions, particularly under pressure, whether it's quick or slow. If you're a very slow decision maker and you like to kind of think things through, then being a shorter time frame trader can be stressful. If you like to make quick decisions, then having to wait for ages to make a decision or for something to move can be very stressful. So that can be a factor. And also whether people are very analytical or whether they're kind of much more kind of intuitive and what I would call kind of like street smart, good readers of external situations. So that can be a factor as well. Also people's level of patience can be a factor. And also, you know, how much they want to kind of be involved, whether they're happy to sit back and watch, or whether they want to kind of be in and be active in trading. So the great thing about trading is there's so many different markets and different styles of trading, different ways of trading, that, you know, most people should be able to find something that suits them, and even, you know, within their lifestyle factors as well. Is it worthwhile putting into your log the trades you made, but also the trades you didn't? Absolutely. I actually did this with a trader. In fact, I've done it with many traders. But where traders are either developing a strategy or where they think there's an opportunity to be more successful, that's one thing I'll always get them to do. Is you know, if they're saying to me, I'm not taking trades. If it's hesitation or fear on the other side of the coin, again, it's a great thing to do, because if we just in our mind remember the trades we didn't take, we'll remember the ones that we didn't take that would have been winners because we missed out, but we won't always remember the trades that we didn't take but that actually would have been losers. And so we get this skewed hindsight bias data. So if we want to kind of get a real feel for what's going on, we do need to log the trades we didn't take as well, because if we've got a sense that we should be taking them, if we start to log them and follow them through as accurately as possible, looking at, you know, where would our stop have been, would we have been stopped out or not, and so on, then it can give us a real feeling of confidence that either we are doing the right thing by not taking them, or the confidence to start taking them if the results are obviously favorable. Do I know a real trading strategy with a positive expectancy? And there's a little bit of laughing after that. I'll tell you what, if I did know it, I wouldn't tell you. There are lots of strategies with positive expectancies, but the thing with a trading strategy is it's likely to have that expectancy within a set of market conditions. It may not have that same expectancy over time. And one of the things that I think I've seen from some of the older traders I've worked with is that over the years they've had to be flexible in their approaches. Some have changed markets they've traded, some have changed their styles of trading, some have changed time frames. So traders have had to adapt over time, and I think that's really key. And I've seen traders, even over the 5 or 6 years that I've been working in trading, who aren't trading anymore because they failed to adapt when the market's changed. And you know, sometimes, you know, you've got to be adaptable, you've got to be flexible, and that's sometimes the challenge is, you know, we don't know when it's going to change back, whether it's going to change back. Do I keep persevering? Do I change? A good friend of mine who's a very good trader, one of the things he's always doing in the background is looking at developing new trading strategies, so that if something stops working and he kind of feels that maybe it's coming towards an end, he's got something else to kind of pick up with, which I think, you know, is quite interesting. Just going to do a few more questions before we finish off. I find that analysing individual trades is too much detail. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, this is an individual thing. I'm not trying to force anyone to do anything against their will. It's not my style. I'm just making some suggestions, things that may or may not be useful. I'll keep coming back to it all the time. Trading, you know, you've got to develop your own philosophies about trading. You've got to develop your own approach for trading. And that's the beauty of it. You know, it allows for that individual expression and freedom. So whatever is useful for you, that's the right thing to do. How long should sim trading be performed for? Typically, in the institutions I work in, we tend to use the sim to help traders develop their strategies, to learn how to use front-end trading platforms, to get familiar with the markets they're trading. But generally, we try and get them off the sim sooner rather than later, so they start to experience the real emotion of trading that comes in with the monetary side. So I remember watching a program once about high board diving, and they had Justin Lee Collins. Those of you in the UK will probably know him. If you're from the US, he's one of our minor celebrities over here. And they were teaching him how to do high board diving. And one of the things I remember is that as he made his progression up the diving boards from the pool side to the 1 meter to the 3 meter to the 5 meter to the 10 meter, one of the key things was not allowing him to stay at any one level for too long until he became too comfortable there, because it would become harder to move on. So it's kind of just as he was ready, they kind of moved him on again. So I thought that's quite interesting, and I would say it's the same on the sim. If you get too comfortable there, it's going to be very hard to come off it again in the end. With the pro traders, how many are guided by the bank's fundamental view on, say, Forex, and how long do they spend in trades? All very different, to be honest. Do they square off each day? No. A lot of guys will have a core position rolling. Could be weeks, could be months. Some guys maybe even over a year, but they'll trade in and out and around those positions as well. So, and some guys will have kind of a core book they'll trade, but they might have some other little books they trade in, on more of an intraday basis. A lot of guys do a bit of Forex on the side, maybe in their prop books. So it's yeah, but some are guided by the views. But I mean, obviously in the bank, you've got the analysts. You get all your research given to you. There's a big network on the trading floor, so there's a lot of resources there. But to be honest, a lot of traders still, a lot of the traders, the really good traders, it's their own planning, their own preparation. It's their research. It's their trading ideas that they're executing. Do I think exercise before trading is useful? I think exercise before trading is very useful for people who enjoy exercising. All the research shows that exercise obviously releases positive endorphins. It gets the mind ready. It improves alertness and concentration and focus. So if you enjoy exercising, if you've got time to do it before you trade, even a quick 5-10 minute walk can be ideal. Doesn't have to be anything too vigorous, but yeah, I mean, I think the research supports that exercise is very powerful on mind body, and I think for a lot of people it's a great start to the day. So if you can fit it in, then I'm all for it. So, and the great thing about exercise, like trading, there's many different forms. Doesn't mean you've got to go to the gym. Doesn't mean you've got to go out running. You can go out cycling, rollerblading. I know some of you guys in the US might even go skiing. Go swimming. Anything really, just kind of get a bit of blood flow, get a bit of release, and it's great for stress relief as well. Exercise, amazing way of relieving the stress and strains of trading. And on that note, as the questions have come to an end, it's pretty much good timing. And I want to thank you all for tuning in on tonight's session. It's been pretty intense. We've covered an enormous amount of material. Thank you for your engagement. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for your answers on the polls and during the presentations. I'd encourage you now to obviously get the link tomorrow, have a listen again over the next few days. If between now and next week you've got any questions or you want any help or support in implementing anything that we've talked about, please do email me. That's part of the e-coaching program. I'm here to help you to improve. Have a very enjoyable rest of the evening. Guys in the US, have a great rest of the day. And it's been a pleasure. Good night, and speak to you all next week.